Hello, everyone, and welcome to Telecom Tuesday, where we talk about net neutrality and if it's dead or not, and if Trump killed it. Roll the intro. There still isn't an intro. We don't need an intro. We'll just do the show. I was this close to having a guest on this show today, but it was all very last minute and it fell through. But maybe next time we'll actually have somebody other than my wonderful sensual voice to guide you into the hypnosis of telecom news. And today's very interesting because this is the first episode after the 2016 presidential election where Trump won. Surprise, surprise. Well, some people are very surprised. Some people aren't very surprised. Who knows? Don't trust the media anyway, right? Essentially, what I wanted to dig in is, regardless if it was going to be a Trump or Clinton, I wanted to figure out what the impact of that election, that candidate would have on things that are important to us in the technology and telecom industry. And the most obvious one is net neutrality. And there's some other subtle ones too, like positions on the economy and taxes and things like that. We'll just dig into it on what we think Donald Trump is going to do to the U.S. Net neutrality stuff. So it may, you may or may not know that the FCC relatively recently got a new head commissioner. And in my opinion, he's been doing a hell of a good job. I forget his name. I'll have to look it up here in a second. But essentially, he used to be a big lobbyist for cable and ISP companies. And people were really worried that, okay, we just assigned this guy who's a lobbyist going for the big companies. He's going to make sure these big companies can do whatever they want to put controls and counters and extort money out of customers unnecessarily and ridiculously when compared to how a lot of the rest of the world deals with their internet. So the hope for net neutrality was gone, and the livelihood of people being able to compete with companies like Amazon and Netflix was down the toilet, because in a non-net neutrality world, a provider could charge a premium for packets that would be sent on their network. The concept would be, today, if you wanted to compete with Netflix, all you would need is server infrastructure and an internet connection, and you would be on the internet in the exact same way Netflix is on the internet. Without net neutrality, Netflix could pay more money than you, and thereby their experience would be better by default just because they paid their carrier more money to be prioritized above you. Essentially, I believe that would hinder any competition on the internet space, defeat the purpose of it, putting a capitalist, and I'm capitalist by the way, but it would put a dangerously capitalistic notch into the way the internet is maintained, that I don't think America, as a American dream entrepreneurial based country, really wants to go. So that's net neutrality today. By the way, the commissioner passed net neutrality. He basically screwed over the ISPs. He passed laws and has gone after things for these big carriers in a much more vicious way than people thought, given that he used to be a friend of these carriers, and that's very interesting and pleasing. And the fear is that with Trump now, he's going to remove the commissioner, assign somebody else, and get rid of net neutrality. A lot of this stems from a tweet. Of course, it's Donald Trump, so it all came back from a tweet that happened about 2 years ago. So who the hell knows if he even feels this way or how educated he was at the time. But the tweet's on the screen. It says, Obama's attack on the internet, referring to net neutrality. There's another way, top-down power grab. Net neutrality is the Fairness Doctrine. Will target conservative media. Essentially, his argument was that when you have net neutrality, it restricts a provider, an ISP's capability of providing a service, a specialized service, to its customers. And the Fairness Doctrine, which I'll bring up here right away if you're not super familiar with it, is a relatively old FCC policy back from 1949 that basically said if you're going to broadcast on television, you have to show both sides of the story, at least a little bit. There was no specifics on how much you had to show of both sides. But for example, in the election, you wouldn't be able to have a news resource that only talked good about Trump and only talked bad about Hillary. They would have had to do both if the Fairness Doctrine was in effect. They wouldn't have to do both equally, but they'd have to do both. That was put into effect because there was a very, very, very small number of channels back in those days. And it was believed that for the good of the American people, the media in those channels had to be as unbiased as possible to provide them with good information for them to make educated decisions off of. So it had a good cause. But of course, forcing companies into discussing things that they don't want to discuss is relatively un-American sounding, right? You're a company, therefore you have to do exactly as the government says. That's not really American style. So as more television channels came out and you as the consumer had more choices to pick from, you were able to then select, maybe the channel that's talking about the stuff you want, or you can go back and forth between two channels that talk about differing sides, thereby giving you the choice of gathering that information yourself. So the Fairness Doctrine was, I don't know if it was overturned or if it was just, taken down or something like that, but it went away. And so again, all this stems back from a tweet from 2 years ago, so who knows if he still feels this way. His comparison to the Fairness Doctrine is not really accurate because an internet provider, although the recent acquisitions are another story, because an internet provider doesn't really deliver media, not directly. An internet provider simply delivers a conduit for media, like you going on to this podcast, for example. It's not like having or not having net neutrality affects the provider's ability to do that. And that's not like that affects the consumer's ability to get information. All net neutrality really does is make sure that people who want to compete on the internet have a fair chance without having to have a giant bucket of money, thereby defending against some monopolies and things like that. So let's see, what else is here to talk about Trump and net neutrality? Frankly, I'm not sure what Trump's stance is today on net neutrality. No one really knows. A lot of this stuff is sort of guesstimation from the media today. It was a 2-year ago statement. It was inaccurate in his understanding of it, which means that once he gets a proper understanding of it, he's probably not going to feel that way anymore. He's sort of shown that trend, at least now with the recent interviews. Seems more level-headed than he looked before being president-elect. So I'm hopeful that he will see the light and keep net neutrality around, keep the awesome commissioner in the FCC, and things will just move forward. Let's see, what else is there? What is next on the wonderful list of how Donald Trump may affect our economy? Okay, so still on the topic of net neutrality, let's talk about AT&T here for a second. And this was going to be an item in the Telecom news section, but not really necessary right now. Essentially, AT&T has read the first story. Please subscribe or sign in. Pretty sure I was able to read this before. Am I something broken here? No, that's okay. I'll paint you a word picture. Essentially, AT&T, with having DirecTV now, I just mentioned those acquisitions, is delivering another thing over its wires. So if it sells you internet and it wants to give you, I think is it Netflix? Is it AT&T that's doing Netflix, or is AT&T doing something else? Anyway, they have some video streaming service that they have a deal with either provider or they own the service to deliver. And even though in their contracts they have data limits, which sucks, by the way, but they have a data limit for their internet connectivity, so you can only transfer 100 gig, a terabyte of data a month or something like that. With the service that's their service, they will give that to you, and it won't come out of your bandwidth limit. Which, in the back of your head, you're thinking, well, that's not so bad. If I buy something from AT&T, it shouldn't come out of my bandwidth limit. And the answer is you're right. But then then nothing else being delivered over the circuit should come out of your bandwidth limit. Because just like AT&T doesn't get special privileges to stream to AT&T, Netflix shouldn't get special privileges to deliver it to AT&T. You see how it kind of goes both ways? If Netflix can't have an agreement where their data can't be exempt from the AT&T cap limits, then AT&T's stuff can't have an exemption that makes them not part of that cap limit. It's a pretty relatively obvious case to make, and pretty certain AT&T is going to lose. But what's interesting is that this is the first instance that's occurring, and this happened just today, that is after Trump became president-elect. And so the wonder is if, depending on how long this takes to go through the, I don't know if it's really a court cycle, but the efficient cycle, if Trump changes the legislation or the policy on net neutrality between then and there. So it's a good story to keep track of if you're wondering what a Trump election or a Trump presidency might do for net neutrality. Because if Trump comes back and does what he might do, because he's very capitalist, and again, I'm pro-capitalism, but there should be some limits at some point. If his capitalist mindset is it's AT&T's business, AT&T can make the rules that they want, then that is a shot in the foot to net neutrality, and I would believe that net neutrality is on the way out. If they come back and say that's not fair, you can do that, but only if you let anybody else on the internet have an opportunity to do that, then at least that's still net neutrality, or just a no, still net neutrality. We'll see how it pans out, worth paying attention to. Okay, changing the topic off of net neutrality here for a second, we're going to go through some fun articles here about how Trump's policies could affect the telecom industry. So, just kind of going down the list. Hang on, I lost some of my notes. There they go. So he has a couple of stances from immigration, income taxes, corporate taxes, that would have a pretty big effect potentially on the telecom industry and all industries, but let's just focus on telecom. Essentially, starting with immigration, right? So if we have the temptation for American companies to outsource or go and get H-1B visa participants, talent overseas and bring them in, if we remove that capability, like I believe Trump wants us to do, then we're going to have more U.S. employed people in these companies, which is good. But the con is that you're no longer necessarily getting the best qualified candidate for an open requisition. So if I'm limited to a pool of resources in America, but the one person who's really good at this and could really help my American company go leaps and bounds ahead is in India, and I can't hire him anymore, or it's financially unreasonable to hire him anymore, then you've hindered that American company. So it's sort of this pro-con. And I'm sort of the side that if we can have the job be done in America, then we should do it here. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what the impact on the economy is like. Frankly, I think we have plenty of smart people in our own country for these jobs to make probably no noticeable impact on that side. All right, import taxes. So this is, again, something that Trump is pretty adamant about. Basically, tariffs on countries we trade with in an attempt to encourage locally produced and locally manufactured everything. So the more we can do within America, the better. And a way of encouraging that, or really discouraging going from outside it, is adding a giant tariff or tax on goods and services that leave and rejoin borders. So if it used to cost me $100 to, I don't know, make a napkin. This is a really bad example. $100 to make a napkin. If it cost me that in America, if it cost me $100 in, let's say, Australia, to make this golden napkin, but it used to cost me $120 in America to make that golden napkin, I would go to Australia. It's a little bit cheaper, and I get the same napkin. But if there is a 45% tax on doing business with Australia, Suddenly that's a $145 napkin, and a $120 one in America is now not so bad. Is it more expensive? Yes. Does it lower some profit margin? Yes. Does it lower a bunch of other things in numbers and figures in the business world? Yes. But it means that we're going to be adding and keeping money within the country, so that's a good thing. So again, a pro and a con. Pro, it encourage our buyers to stay in the U.S. Easy. Con, it's more expensive potentially, and another big one is that they may do the same thing. So like if we have a tariff on China, so thereby we're discouraged from doing business to China, China may do the same thing back to us, thereby discouraging China doing business with us, so the economy could kind of dwindle down. But the question is that offset by the strength of the economy being handled within the country? Only time will tell. Corporate tax. This is I think the last topic on the Trump administration and its effect on the telecom industry. So this one's pretty simple. Trump wants lower taxes on big corporations. So what's a lower tax mean? It means that they have more cash in their pockets. So big companies can go after bigger goals with the bigger bank that they have, if it doesn't all go to bonuses of their executives. So that's more or less a good thing, right? Our companies will have more money in their pocket to reinvest in the American market and grow. Great. The con, the government doesn't get as much money. So, and when we're talking serious, when you cut 1 percentage point off of a tax, when a company is making a couple $1 billion, you're talking millions of dollars just for that company. And why is my math so bad? What is 1% of $1 billion? That's too many zeros. I'm getting lost here. 1 million, 100 million, 1 billion times 0.01. $10 million. So that's just 1% difference for $1 billion company, which isn't that outrageous and is relatively more or less average for your average size company, I believe, in America. Depends on how you cut averages. But $10 million per company, big deal. Not going into the government every year. So that's a challenge. So the government needs to get money from other places in order to do that, or it just needs to operate more efficiently, which is Trump's idea. But it's one of those things. I'll believe it when I see it. Not that I don't think there's ways to operate more efficiently. There definitely are. Stop using BlackBerries for starters. But big wheels turn slow. Government's the biggest wheel of them all. It's not going to turn quick. Maybe by the end of his term, we'll start seeing a change in how efficiently it runs. But frankly, I'm expecting the economy to kind of... Oh, shit. I have no idea what to expect from the economy. It'll be fun to watch. Let's see here. Am I missing anything? Someone's commenting. Hello. I have no idea what you're saying. And I don't know what that number is. But hello. Hi. Okay, so lastly, let's talk about telecom news. So, let's go here. So, Google versus Europe. Google versus Europe. Okay, so, yep, two angry school children. Essentially, Google's being hit with antitrust lawsuit, I guess it is. And the European Commission is basically saying that because you have Android, you have essentially a monopoly on the open operating system for mobile in Europe. And that seems a little stupid to me, but the European Commission's done a couple of stupid things lately. So essentially, and we'll just kind of go through this, Google comes back and says that, hey, we have an open source operating system, and that's the opposite of a monopoly. Anyone can use and program and develop for it. And then the European Commission basically comes back and says, yeah, but in order for people to realistically use your phones, it has to come with Google Play services. And you sort of force that on them because without Google Play services, there's very little value in an Android device, making it very difficult for anyone to use Android without it. And you can only use Google Play services on your device if Google gets a cut of it, and if Google gave you permission to do it. So it's not truly very open. So that's that argument. It's also debatable to say they have a monopoly on something when they're competing against Apple in the market. They're saying that they have a monopoly on the Android ecosystem, which I guess is true, but Android is a direct competitor with Apple, which I don't think anyone would argue. So having a monopoly in Android, but not having a monopoly in Apple, you should argue the opposite, that Apple has a monopoly in Apple operating systems and iOS. Why aren't they getting in trouble? It's sort of a nefarious thing. I guess being proprietary means that you won't have this argument with the European Commission. Let's see. There's something else here. Really, that's it. We'll see who wins. I think Google is basically going to say, hey, listen, if you're going to call us on a monopoly, we'll probably just won't do business there anymore. And then good luck. It's a legitimate option that Google has, and Google would probably be okay without it. So we'll see. I don't know. It depends on if it's all of Europe is a lot of people, come to think of it. For some reason, I was just thinking like Great Britain. If it's all of Europe, that's a problem. They can't do that. We'll see. I'm inclined to think that if anything, they'll get a slap in the hand. Maybe a lesser fine. Maybe they'll need to be monitored to keep themselves open to stuff. I personally would like to see it that, say, I could develop an Android operating system and use Google Play services without the permission of Google. Like, it's just something I include. Google would still get all the profits from their Play Store. I wouldn't be making any money off of that. But it would be cool if I could do that without having to enter in a binding contract with Google. That would be nice. Don't think it's going to happen, but that would be nice. All right, so let's talk about something slightly more telecom-oriented. And that is Nominet, which I believe is a European broadband provider. And they're discussing TV whitespace. And essentially, TV whitespace is, back in the day, really, what was it, 3-4 years ago? We had antennas still for getting television broadcast over the airwaves. And not too long ago, it got converted to the digital spectrum. And essentially, in this process, the spectrum in between channels and frequencies, there is a little bit of space in between those channels to allow buffer room for the frequencies to just be in error. But now with the conversion to digital, there's a lot more buffer room available. That white space in between those spectrums is there. And people are saying that could be perfectly utilized for transmitting 4G over those airwaves. So that's what Nominet is doing. They say that they can get 4G or similar service to very rural, off-the-beaten-path areas, that previously would not have any connectivity opportunity. Now they can have 4G, as easy as you could watch TV with an antenna. Pretty cool idea, utilizing that radio space that we weren't using, or we were using inefficiently, and seeing that we've become more efficient and more aware of the technology we're utilizing. We're able to capitalize on it better. That's awesome. And any times we can scoop up that opportunity to not reinvent the wheel, but just make the wheel turn a little bit smoother, this is a good example of that. And good for them. I hope it works, and I hope other places start doing it, because it would be really cool. I mean, just imagine the implication on the Internet of Things. If basically anywhere you can have a device connected to the Internet, not necessarily dependent on 3G and 4G wireless towers or satellite. So we'll see. And really, that's it for the day. Thank you for joining Telecom Tuesday. Appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, please leave a comment below. If you'd like to be a guest on my show, also leave a comment below. I'll get in touch. And if you, just want to chat, leave a comment below. If you think I'm an idiot, leave a comment below. Like this video if you like it. If you dislike this video, if you disliked it. And I'll see you guys next Tuesday. Bye.